Good afternoon. Welcome to the campus-wide leadership series for, what month are we in? April. I'm still in recovery from Bruce Springsteen, so I might be able to hear again in a week or two. Although a colleague of mine who works on hair cells says chickens regenerate their hair cells, said it's not on. I'm on. Thumbs up. I forgot to give him a thumbs up. Still can't hear us. Hello?
Jeremy, I think, is in the tech room.
I don't think he can hear you either.
Maybe he
now
can.
He can hear her.
Oh, good.
But not me now? Okay, good. So I'm in recovery from Bruce Springsteen, so my hearing isn't quite there. That's probably why you couldn't hear. It was transferable. One piece of business, there is no May campus-wide leadership series. Oh, okay. We're working on it. It's somebody at the Kansas City Royals, and there's a bunch of conflicts, so we're aiming for next year to get him. So my introduction is a little different. It's a personal story that was written in the Kansas City Star some time ago. It starts with the Prairie Village woman spent the year after her 40th birthday performing 40 acts of goodness to honor people who had made a mark in her life. She called her project A Year of Being 40 and Grateful. Told you it was a surprise.
Yes, it is.
She volunteered so many hours around town that she lost count, reading books to Head Start kids, feeding the homeless, teaching Sunday school, and participating in 9 charity walks to fight diabetes, suicide, ovarian cancer, and more. And that's just a sampling. Ms. Greenberg had inspired the self-dubbed Bean Baron, Danny O'Neill, founder of the rotisserie. O'Neill wrote about Greenberg in his annual Christmas letter sent to nearly 14,000 roastery fans, friends, customers, and business associates. I immediately made my list, going all the way back to Mrs. Buckley, my kindergarten teacher in Denison, Iowa. He wrote in his letter, "It only took a few minutes for me to come up with a list of over 50 people who had significantly impacted my life in positive, oftentimes life-altering ways." So I endeavored to commit to 50-plus random but somewhat planned acts of kindness over the next year. O'Neill encouraged his friends to follow his lead, if only to feel an immense sense of gratitude and warmth that will carry you through the holidays and beyond. Ms. Greenberg sparked flames of altruism across the metro and beyond. People told her so in a flood of phone calls, emails, Facebook postings, and text messages. She said in the Kansas City Star article about this experience that her story tapped into something in people that made them hit the pause button and reflect on their own lives as she had done. And as we can do today as we listen to her story about how to manage self-doubt. Tami Greenberg, our speaker for today.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Klein. That was a surprise. I didn't know you were going to bring that up today. I'll tell you a little bit more about that project because it was extraordinarily impactful to me, and I think to others who were connected with it and who heard about it. So this wasn't part of my speech, but I'll just say a few things because it's kind of interesting. I turned 43 years ago. I'm 43. And I had a sort of miniature crisis, or perhaps a full-blown crisis of confidence around it. And a few folks said, is this happening because you're not happy with how your life has turned out so far? And for me, I said, it's really the opposite. I'm so grateful for the opportunities I've had and for the people who have invested in me and that I've learned from. It's going too fast. That's kind of my sensation at that point with turning 40. I want to slow it all down. And so what I did is I figured out the 40 most influential people in my life. So, from my high school voice teacher, right, to Sunday school teachers, to bosses and mentors and family, of course. And for each of those 40 people, I wrote them a letter. And I said, here's what you've meant to me. And I will do a project on your behalf over the course of this year of my being 40 and grateful. So for every person, I identified a project that would be meaningful to them. So for the suicide prevention walk, it was for my high school history teacher who had lost a brother to suicide, right? So everything that I did was very meaningful to the person I did it for or on behalf of or in thinking. And so I encourage you, it's about self-doubt, it's about our humanity, right? I encourage you to think about the people who have meant something in your life and tell them they have meant something in your life. Write a letter, give a call, send a note, send up a prayer or whatever is meaningful to you. for the people who have invested in us. So with that, I will start talking about self-doubt, the roadblock to leadership. I have, unfortunately, an acknowledgement here that I am not, in fact, Bill Self. Like, he's coming next time. So if you're like, oh, I thought this was that one, go ahead. You can keep your lunch. No one will judge you. Just, oh, I got a phone call. I have to go. No one will mind, including me. But if, in fact, you want to spend some time thinking about self-doubt and confidence and what we can do along our journey, then you've come to the right place. Here's what I'm thinking we will do today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, my journey, kind of how I have come to this point in my own personal evolution and growth. We'll talk about self-doubt in general. I'm not an uncommon phenomenon to any of us. We'll talk about some of the implications for leadership. And I will also ask you to share some ideas. So I'm planning to leave some time at the end for you all to share with each other, because I suspect that as we go through this, it'll trigger some recollections, right? Some thoughts. So I would ask you to just jot a note down so you remember when the time comes to make a comment, that you'll have something to share with your colleagues so we can learn from each other. Because I think often, if not always, the answer is in the group and what we can learn from each other. So first, I would be remiss, though, in my role if I didn't tell you a little bit about Ronald McDonald House Charities, where I am so privileged to serve as a CEO. You may, in fact, know that Ronald McDonald House Charities in Kansas City got its start, like, literally around the corner, like 100 steps from here. So this house up on the top left was our first Ronald McDonald House in Kansas City. It's just around the corner. It's a marketing thing now. It is no longer Ronald McDonald House now, although people always think it is. But we do now have 3 houses that are over by Children's Mercy, houses 1, 2, and 3, in addition to a family room inside Children's Mercy Hospital. So we are, of course, a place that's a home away from home for families with sick kids. I suspect that you knew that part already. And I thought I would tell you a little bit about Ronald McDonald House Charities. Particularly, we served 5,500 families last year. Those are 5,500 unique families. That's a non-duplicated number. So our 87 rooms every night, those 5,500 families stay with us while their kids are getting medical care. Those families came to us last year from 34 states, so we're drawing from throughout the country. Translated last year to over 23,000 nights in lodging. And those families also came to us from 15 different medical institutions, including, of course, KU, right? So I suspect that along the way you may be serving families who are staying with us. It costs us $78 a night per room for the families we serve. Last year we turned away over 800 families because we were full. We know that number will go down this year because we have more capacity to serve with the recent expansion. We have children teen play spaces, free laundry, free transportation to medical facilities. And we have an organic garden. So we all know how important fruits and vegetables are. We just planted an orchard last year, so it won't bear fruit. I often talk about bearing fruit figuratively. In this case, it won't bear fruit literally for a couple of years. The orchard won't. But we have a vegetable garden that produced 1,100 pounds of produce last year that volunteer groups can use and turn into meals for our families. So we have volunteer groups every night in all 4 locations making meals for the families we serve. People often want to know what the average number of days that a family will stay with us, and that number is 8. So for an average of 8 nights, families will stay with us. If you want to get involved, you can volunteer in any number of ways. I would love to have some of you serve on a committee. So if you think, yeah, I need to sort of increase my charitable involvement or philanthropic commitment, give us a call at Ronald McDonald House. We will plug you in some way that's meaningful to you. We have a young professionals group called the Red Shoe Society with monthly networking and other kinds of events, and of course we always appreciate financial support. So just so you know, there's our website. If you want to know more about Ronald McDonald House Charities, let us know. It's a really, really special place to work. We know that we are serving families who are in the most critical and raw and vulnerable time of their whole lives with their kids, and so we're really honored to be doing the work. But really what you're curious about is, how did we get to this point today? Why her? Why this? Why now? So I was really privileged and lucky to be named for NextGen Leaders by the Kansas City Business Journal last fall. It's a group of folks who are doing interesting things in the community that they profile. And as part of that interview, they said, what's been your greatest challenge? What have you overcome? And I said this, and I know you can't read it. It was the greatest challenge. Sometimes, what I said was, sometimes the biggest roadblock can be self-doubt. I work hard to embrace the challenge, stretch, be ready to learn, ready to grow, and not be my own barrier. So as a result of saying this, and there's an element of vulnerability just in saying this, right? So as you're being profiled with other folks who are really extraordinary leaders in their own spaces, in their own industries, so it was a long interview. It was a 45-minute interview, and I was like, oh, they picked that to pull out, and then Marty very, very kindly gave me a call and said, we have been thinking about this as a team here at KU, and the imposter syndrome, and what does it mean to be leaders with self-doubt, and kind of move forward within this context. And so she asked me to come and talk to you about this today, so I'm really privileged to do so. So one of the things that Marty asked me to talk about was just my own journey. What has it been like to be me over these 43 years? So I got my start in Dodge City, Kansas. I wasn't born there, but I did most of my growing there. My standard joke about Dodge City is that I got out of Dodge, right? People talk about getting out of Dodge. I was like, I did that, right? I got out of Dodge. It was a great place to grow up, right? Small town, all the sort of idyllic things that you picture with a small town. My family of origin, you might be curious to, or interested to know that I come from a healthcare family. My dad is a retired radiologist. He was a radiologist out in Dodge City. My mom is a retired nurse, and my brother is an emergency room physician's assistant, right? So healthcare, the kinds of work that you all do, is absolutely in my DNA. And I knew early on that I wanted to be a social worker, and be in the helping profession alongside all of you. So a very supportive family of origin and a good growing up experience. When it came time to go to college, I went to the Chicago area. So show of hands, if you have heard of Wheaton College in Illinois. Okay, several folks, okay. It's often in the news for controversial kinds of things. It's a super conservative evangelical school in the western suburbs of Chicago. So there I got a bachelor's in psychology and made a number of good friends. When I graduated, I had a decision to make. I had sort of a Goldilocks-esque conundrum because Chicago just felt too big, right? Chicago, especially for a Dodge City girl, right? Chicago was too big, but Dodge City had come to feel too small, right? And Chicago was too far away from family and friends, and Dodge City was kind of too close, right? It was, I wanted to spread my wings a little. And so Kansas City, I really picked because it was just right, just in the middle, just so I was like Goldilocks, right? And so I landed here. I didn't have a job. I didn't have an apartment. My mom co-signed on an apartment lease so I could live somewhere, and I got my first social work job and kind of started to build a life. I soon after moving here met my partner of 21 years, Mary Chris Blacan. She and I have been together, like I said, for 21 years. We got married 2 years ago in Iowa. It was at the time, one of the states we could get married in. So, and she and I then have 2 boys. We have 2 kiddos named Ben and Alex. They are 14 and 12. They are the lights of our lives, just as for those of you who are parents, your kids are the lights of your lives. So they keep us on our toes and delighted most of the time and consternated some of the time. So there's a little bit about my family. My career has been, I think, kind of outlaid in a bio that you all have seen, but just to kind of give you the highlight version, once I came to Kansas City, got a master's in social work, right? So I'm fulfilling my social work dream. Have worked in child welfare in the field of HIV and AIDS, and then worked for 11 years with the National MS Society. My final role there was as the president of the Mid-America chapter, the local chapter. I also worked for 2.5 years at United Way as a senior VP there, and have been now CEO at Ronald McDonald House for 8 months, which PS I love. It's awesome. And then just a few things about civic engagement. I've been really lucky and fortunate to have interesting opportunities to be in a lot of rooms with smart folks. So I was part of the Centurions program at the Chamber of Commerce. I did the Kansas City Tomorrow program through the Civic Council. I was on a Mayor's Challenge cabinet, which was super interesting. And even like this, the series of service projects that I did, right, over that year of being 40. I've been very interested to learn about kind of what's happening in our community. So that's pretty much my journey. That brings us to today. But the thing is, that's sort of the highlight reel. That's the Facebook version, right? It's, it sounds a little bit braggy McBraggerson for me to be like, I did this and this and this. So what I'd like to do next is tell you kind of the subtext, the color commentary that people don't often give when they're running through their own highlight reel, right? So here's what's really happening with all that going on. So I feel like every time I turn my head, it's loud. I'm going to put that in the middle. Let me know if you can't. Here, all right, it's in the middle. So in Dodge City, right, just a small town girl. So there's really great things about that, about growing up in a small town. It's also hard, right? You're sheltered all the time. Bruce Springsteen, right, brings it to mind, right? All the time, people like, remember when blah, blah, blah happened in the 80s? I'm like, yeah, I had no idea, right? Just missed it because we were in Dodge, And I have friends who totally tease me, like, you missed a generation of pop culture. I had to catch up after the fact. Here's one example I always give. I had never heard of The Gap. Like, I went to college and I was like, what's that? Like, it was, whoops. Apparently it's a thing, The Gap. Right, so you sort of learn to live with that, right? So my family of origin, as I said, was super supportive, but there's a pressure that comes with that. When you get kind of these, you can be anything you want, we support you. There's, they believe in me so much, do I believe in myself that much? There's a pressure around, can I live up to those expectations? And I've mentioned, right, my super conservative evangelical college, not at all an easy place to be gay, right? So, I say here, life in the closet, I don't recommend it. Just be who you are, whoever that is. And so for me, it's just hard. Ugh, right? I wouldn't come out again. I mean, it's kind of the only one I have to do once, because it's kind of horrible. So I'm glad to be on this side of it. And so when you talk about self-doubt, right? Talk about a really just kind of painful thing to go through, right? Who am I? Who am I in this world? How do I fit in? How, there's a whole cohort of my friends. P.S. Most of those friends I've described dropped me like a hot potato, right? So I had to start over with friend making, with my sort of new life, right? So self-doubt, whatever your journey is towards becoming who you really are, it's going to be plagued with hard times, because that's just life, right? And if it's hard, doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means that it's real life. So then, of course, coming to Kansas City, building my family, who, like I said, were mostly delighted and sometimes consternated. So I think if you have not experienced self-doubt in your career, surely you've experienced it as a parent, because I think until you, match wits with a 3-year-old and lose, right? Or until you try to sort of outthink, we joke sometimes, it's like Survivor, outthink, outplay, outlast, right? And we have been outthunk, outplayed, and outlasted many times, right? So, and so you just kind of do your best. I mean, that's been one of our lessons with parenting, is there's no rule book, and the rule books that exist, right? You kind of have to figure out how to make it work for your own family, your own life. So adaptability, or you'll make yourself crazy, right? That's the other thing, is you can just make yourself crazy. So in terms of career, right, I've had really interesting ways to contribute to meaningful work. I mean, that's what we all want. That's what you all are doing, right? In healthcare, you are contributing to people's health and their livelihood, et cetera. But here's been my sensation every single time I've gotten a new job. You get this sense of, can I really do this? Like, you interviewed, right? You sold them on it. Like, they believe, kind of like my parents, right? They believe in me. Can I really do this now? And I wouldn't say that that one time I had that. Like, I always have that, right? When starting a new job or starting just a new endeavor. And it just is. I mean, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I think it's somewhat universal. And I'm just kind of acknowledging it out loud. And I think for me, the way forward has just been to move forward, to don't get stuck there. Like, just because I'm doubting, can I really do this? Doesn't mean I can't do it, right? It's just a natural part of the process, and then you kind of go forward. So my career has always had that. I mean, here I started at Ronald McDonald House 8 months ago, following a really successful CEO. It's a thriving organization. People love it because the work is so special. There's an immense pressure around carrying the brand well and continuing to serve families in really meaningful ways. Can I really do this? I don't know. Like, we'll find out, right? Check back with me. We'll see how things go. And civic engagement, right? So I listed those cool, centurions and mayors, stuff. This is generally my sensation. Oh my God, everyone here is smarter than I am. So there is something really intimidating, and this perhaps would be a comparable scenario, right? There's something intimidating about being in a room full of smart people, right? We're all having that sensation now, and you have that sensation most days of your life. And so I'm really familiar with that phenomenon and kind of pushing through it, right? Just still being in the room, like I'm in the room, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn from the other folks in the room. So my position has always been, I'm really excited to be around folks who are smarter than I am, a case could easily be made factually. They are smarter than I am. And so I have something to learn, and perhaps I have something to contribute to the conversation too. So that has helped to fuel me. So again, there's kind of the Facebook highlight reel version, and then the color commentary, the real story. So my approach today has been to manage self-doubt, right? I think it's a fallacy, it's a myth to think that we're going to escape it, we're going to eradicate it, we're going to be able to somehow sidestep it. It just happens. It's developmentally appropriate at different times. So the trick is to manage it, to not to live without it, but to learn how to manage it and evolve with it. So recognize it when it's happening, name it, move forward with it. Authenticity, I think, is here's what I want to say. It's the name of the game. I'll probably say that 20 times. So I'm apparently playing 20 games. That's what so authenticity is the name of the game. as is vulnerability and as are other things. I have found, perhaps it's through the coming out process or maybe it's just life, it's just too hard to be somebody you're not. It's just too hard, so give yourself a break, be who you are, whatever that means. If you're funny, be funny. If you're really cerebral, be that way. Like, whatever your style is, just don't try to match everybody else in the room, because the room is better when every person in the room is their own authentic self. It just is, right? We all believe in the power of diversity, so let's be diverse. And so I think that, authenticity is just, the importance of it can't be overstated. And then vulnerability is a piece of that, right? So being able to acknowledge that you have self-doubt, being able to acknowledge you don't know an answer, being able to acknowledge that you're learning, right? We all want to be learners, so acknowledging that and having the vulnerability to acknowledge that. I almost said admit, but admit implies that it's wrong. But just acknowledge it, right? Because it's real. So like I said, learning, stay open for sure. And I have trust on this list because I think trust matters in this kind of category of thinking about self-doubt. Because at some point you have to kind of trust yourself. You trust the universe, that the worst thing that's going to happen probably won't, right? You trust that, whatever it is that you're trusting in, right? The universe or God or yourself or your peers or the system or the process, like trust it, right? Just kind of let that take over. And also be trustworthy, right? So it's trust that you are earning and trust that you are giving. And I think that will help create kind of a safety net so it feels less scary to step out in leadership kinds of roles. So here's the thing. So we'll just talk about self-doubt in general. Enough of my journey, right? But just self-doubt in general. Here's what I really would like for you all to take away from this is that everyone has it sometimes. It's not reserved for a particular few. You're not weak when it's happening. You don't have to be ashamed of it. It just happens, and it happens to everybody sometimes. Most of us don't walk around with it like perched on our shoulder really big all the time. Most of us, it kind of waxes and wanes. You'll go through times when it's stronger and when it's less strong. A way to flip it is to think about confidence and self-assurance, right? So we all have that sometimes too. So even thinking about it differently, I think, can have some power. If we're like, oh, self-doubt, I'm having self-doubt again. It already creates a thing, right? Versus, okay, I'm not feeling so confident about this, right? I need to work on my confidence. Even the way we talk about it, I think, can have some power. Now, there are times when self-doubt is undoubtedly dangerous, right? We can really be your enemy. Times like this, right? Times when order and kind of following the plan. When you really need to be confident and know what you're doing, right? Firefighters, military, surgeries, right? There are times when you just cannot have doubt in that moment, or you have to really manage it really, really tightly to move confidently forward. There are other times when self-doubt can be your friend. So let's see if this works well. There's sound, but it mostly is giggling, so that's all you're missing. Giggling, and there we go. Right? So the internet, my friends, is full of examples of times when self-doubt would have been awesome, right? Perhaps I shouldn't jump from the roof into the pool. No, that's crazy. I can totally make it, right? So it can be your friend. It can be your friend. So if self-doubt is helping you make a good decision about something, listen to that, right? Your gut will inform you when you are really sort of stepping off a ledge, literally, or figuratively, for sure. As I was thinking about this, talking about this today, I wanted to just sort of pause and think about this phenomenon that is uniquely American and sort of a new thing, but it's this notion of false confidence or honest overconfidence is what it's sometimes, honest overconfidence. Like, I don't know the answer, but I really am confident that I do, right? So, thinking you have the answer is different from actually getting the answer right. And American students in particular these days are ranking really high in confidence, but not necessarily high in scores. Everyone, you see here, roughly 70 to 80% of us believe we're above average. That's mathematically impossible, right, for all of us to be above average. It's kind of a Lake Woebegone scenario, right, where all the children are above average. And there's just an interesting thing that being average is a bad thing all of a sudden, right? That it's, so we have this competition thing that's happening in our culture and our zeitgeist. So I think what we are not striving for as people, as humans, as leaders, as professionals, we're not looking for overconfidence, for this kind of false, hollow, kind of bravado that's kind of, I got it all. We're not looking for that, right? Because that's not real. We're looking for something that's a really honest confidence and self-assurance, understanding what we're strong at, what we're not strong at, etc. So when we think about self-doubt, when it is helping us, when it is hurting us. Self-doubt may help you have some thoughtful reflection, right? Where do I need to be learning? Where do I have some gaps? Where am I at risk here? Where do I need to call in more resources? And that's a good thing. Self-doubt is your friend there. Self-awareness, appropriate risk-taking, and identifying learning needs, those are all good things, right? Nobody likes the person who doesn't have that ability, right? Who's just always closed off to input. But when self-doubt starts to creep in the way of you getting anything done, you expect to be perfect, so you do nothing, right? Or you are so fearful of looking stupid or getting it wrong or, falling, failing, whatever, that you don't move, you don't take action. Self-doubt is absolutely a barrier to you in that space, and then you've lost your motivation. So again, I think when you're experiencing self-doubt, because it will happen, it happens to all of us, right? We've acknowledged this. Think through, how is this helping me? What is this telling me that I might be missing, right? Help to, think through it. And then I'm only going to let it in so far, right? I'm not going to let it stop me, cripple me, devastate me in terms of being able to make forward motion. This is a really cool book. I totally recommend it. I also say that to say most self-help books I read the first half of, and then I kind of peter out. So I've read the first half of most of the books that I recommend. But this is really a terrific first half of this book. It's called The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. It's Wendy Mogul is the author, and it's a parenting book. But I think there are some really interesting lessons there, particularly around perfectionism, and it's this notion that being average is an insult, right? And that we all expect to be special, and we teach our kids that they must be special and they must be above average. And the blessing of a skinned knee, that we learn when we fall, we learn when we fail, we learn when we don't have, so the notion of helicopter parents, right? The parents are hovering over their kids. I heard a new term in the last, month or so, the term lawnmower parent. Have you guys heard that? So lawnmower parent just basically mows down the grass in front of their kids. The kid can just walk unencumbered through life. Wow, everything is so smooth, right? So we, society, are not doing our kids any favors by helicoptering over them or lawn mowing in front of them. And so this is an interesting book to think about that. And you think about how that sets us up then as adults, right? This expectation that we're going to be good at everything. If we got straight A's in high school, then we must be great at life. Well, right? Who gets straight A's in life? And so we get set up this expectation of perfectionism that I think is really interesting. And if we can learn to embrace failure, learn from it, grow from it, take risks, and do the thing that's hard, then we end up being kind of better, richer, more robust people in the process. And let's be honest, right? When we are talking about doubt, self-doubt, when we're talking about confidence, gender, it often plays a role. Not always, right? I'm not stereotyping. I'm not going to draw wide conclusions demographically. But here's what we know. It's old news, right? That some characteristics, when they are ascribed to men, will make, that man is strong and decisive and, really super great, right? And those same qualities when ascribed to a woman, well, she's a bitch and she's rigid and she's, too domineering, right? So it's not fair. That's old news. We know that. But there's a lot of research being done, too, around how women, in particular, kind of perceive their confidence, what is impacting their ability to move forward bravely, to move forward confidently. Things like hesitation to raise your hand or ask a question, that women tend to be more likely to worry that this question is going to sound dumb, like this is going to sound stupid. I'm, like I said, right, in my civic engagement, I'm in a room full of smart people, they're going to think I'm dumb. Well, really, no. Chances are a lot of them in there thinking the same thing. They're worried other people are going to think they're dumb. Or, here's a newsflash, they don't care, right? The other thing is other people are not thinking about how dumb you are or are not. They're thinking about how dumb they are or are not, right? So we spend so much more time thinking about what other people think of us than they do thinking about us, right? The other thing, and I've heard this in relation to families in particular, but I think it applies to leadership and confidence, that you should never, here's the expression I've always heard, you should never compare the inside of your family to the outside of someone else's family, right? So when your 3-year-old is having a tantrum in Peach Wave or whatever, or your 14-year-old is being super snotty about whatever, and somebody else's family looks just super perfect on the outside, well, their 14-year-old is snotty sometimes, and their 3-year-old has a tantrum sometimes. You're not seeing it in that moment, right? So you don't compare your inside to their outside. I think that same phenomenon is true in leadership and in just professional development. And I think that women often are more typical to have kind of these kind of unhealthy comparisons and do a lot of things to their own minds, quite frankly, around self-doubt. So this book is terrific, The Confidence Code. If you're interested in this topic, this one I'm actually reading the whole thing, but I'm not through yet, so check back. But it really is scientific. So for the scientists in the room, I mean, it's really based on kind of Harvard-level research. So I thought I want to find a book for men. Like, what's a comparable book for men around growing confidence in men, or what self-doubt looks like in men? This is a comparable book that I found. Oh wait, nothing. I mean, so this is not to say there's no book out there that helps men, right, that grow in confidence. But what I'm saying is there's just a cultural zeitgeist around. What's interesting to me about this is that self-doubt has kind of become feminized, right? And as I have talked to some colleagues in preparation to being here, there's a man who said to me, I think I sometimes have a more feminine way of looking at myself, because he's describing his self-doubt. Here's what I would say. Self-doubt is not a feminine or masculine thing. It is a human thing. And I think that with some of the emphasis we have done around kind of gender-based research around it, I think we have done men. I mean, I'm the mom of 2 boys. I think a lot about what kinds of things we can do to support and help young men grow into good, grown-up men. And so I think self-doubt is ever present, so we need to think about ways that we talk about it that are uniquely human, right, and not gender-based. We know, too, that age can play a role, right? So it's a fact that baby boomers have been alive longer than millennials, right? That's just a fact. That's science, math, But sometimes, just culturally, right? We've heard a lot about the confidence that millennials may bring to the workforce. We've heard a lot about baby boomers. I personally am a Gen Xer, and we never talk about Gen Xers. We only ever talk about millennials and baby boomers, right? But we know that confidence, your age may play a role. It may play a role how new you are to a workforce or how long you've been in a workforce. I think what also may play a role is what room you're in, right? So a room of millennials versus a room of baby boomers versus a really diverse room. Same thing with men or women or mixed race groups or whatever. The room you're in will play a role as to how confident you feel in that room. So none of these things are determinants, right? Like, oh, I can't be confident in this room because I'm the only whatever. It's not that. It's pay attention to it and know that these things can influence how confident you feel and to work to push past that. So we all have self-doubt sometimes, right? So I've been talking about some of these things. Get real. Just be pragmatic. You have some strengths, you have some weaknesses. You're not going to be confident at everything. You may be a confident surgeon, but not a confident public speaker. You may be a great writer, but not a great, whatever. So know that you're going to have your own things that you can be confident about. You don't have to be like an all A's in life. And practice. So I came to this session last month. Dr. Lee was here, and he talked about an orchestra conductor, that during practice, an orchestra conductor will be like flailing, right? Doing this, and come on, tubas, and what. But then in the concert, right, just like this, it's all that's needed because there's been practice, right? And so practice will help grow your confidence. You'll have to be, you won't have to be as scared in whatever the moment is. And I can't, the name of the game again. Here's the name of the game. Just say it. Just do it. Move forward. I just can't emphasize this enough that really when self-doubt gets in your way, do the thing. Do the thing you're afraid of. Take the risk because we get so stuck and it just stops us from moving forward. I was talking to somebody about this topic. I'm a CEO of a company, and he said, because I said, give me some advice. I'm doing this presentation. What would you want to tell people? And he said, the Allies didn't know they were going to win World War II. Like, we read World War II history with like the lens of, oh, that's all foreshadowing to the win. Like, we know that Hitler will be defeated. We know that the world will be made whole again. They didn't know that when they were fighting the war, right? The outcome was very uncertain, and they kept moving forward, right? And if they hadn't, then the world would look different today, right? So just do the thing that you're afraid of, and it will help you conquer your self-doubt. And mentorship matters so much. Find people who can give you good advice and be a person who gives good advice as well. Find a mentor, be a mentor. Okay, who knows what this word means? Phototropism. Got a bunch of smart folks. You're all smarter than I am. I already told you that. So who knows what this word means? Any guesses? Don't be afraid of failing. We already talked about that. That's just fine. There's a guess. Go ahead. Growth in response to light. We'll count it as good because it's this. You all see this when you have flowers in your house. That's exactly right. So when you have tulips or sunflowers or whatever in a vase, they turn towards the window, right? Your thoughts will do the same thing. You will tell whatever you're telling yourself becomes true. We know this. This has a lot of names in kind of our psychological world, right? Our self-talk, our self-fulfilling prophecy. We know that mantras are powerful. The secret, remember the secret, was whatever you say to yourself will become true. We know there are limits to that, right? Scientifically, we know there are limits to that. But in this category of growing your own confidence, it actually is very true that when you tell yourself, oh my gosh, I'm giving a presentation on self-doubt to a bunch of super smart people, they're going to think I'm so stupid, right? If I do that, then I'm filling my head, right, with one message. Or if I say, well, you know what, they invited me. I mean, I am who I am, right? I've learned some things along the way. We can go and learn together. That just fuels me in a different way. And so your thoughts are fueling how you feel about yourself. And just think about it, right? What are you telling yourself as you go into the meeting that you're intimidated by, or learning the new thing? Are you telling yourself, I can do this. I've mastered other new skills. I can master this one. This is new and it's hard, right? Are you telling yourself that? Or are you saying, oh, I'll never get it and they're going to think I'm dumb, right? So pay attention to your self-talk. It really matters. It's not so simple as this, right? Genghis Khan. It's not that simple, but we know it matters a lot. We all remember Stuart Smalley, right, from Saturday Night Live, like, I know I'm good enough. I'm smart enough, I'm good enough, and people like me. I heard a thing on the radio just the other day that said, if you tell yourself, I am a healthy eater, just telling yourself, I am a healthy eater, over time will change your eating habits, because you're telling, I'm a healthy eater. You're facing a buffet, I'm a healthy eater, so this is how I'll make the choices, versus you're facing a buffet and you're like, oh, great, there's, all the carbs I can eat, great. So the things we tell ourselves, we know it matters. And then we'll turn our attention, instead of just self-doubt in general, to what it looks like in leadership. So when we think about in leadership roles, it's not like, oh, now I got the big job, I'm the top boss, or I'm the medium boss, or I have some sort of a leadership responsibility, so I'll vanquish all self-doubt now. Well, that's of course not true, right? Sometimes it will rear its ugly head in even fuller force often. So sometimes it's appropriate, it's developmentally appropriate in a new role to have some self-doubt. It can help you make good decisions. Pay attention to it, listen to it, and learn from it. And staying open, right, is a key component of self-doubt and leadership. So these are people that I think of as my own personal executive committee, because mentors have mattered so much to me. That whole 40 project, right, was me thanking people and acknowledging the people, they have been so important to me and I have learned so much. So I asked these people, these are kind of my go-to people, my personal go-to people for career advice, leadership advice. I'm struggling with this, I don't know what to do here or there. And they give me advice. So I asked them what they would say to you all. I said, what are some thoughts you have around self-doubt? All of them are leaders, nonprofit leaders, and they all were like, oh yeah, self-doubt, not a stranger to that one, right? So everyone has it, again. And they said things like, trust your gut, like listen to your instincts, right? Learn from your self-doubt. Stay open. Figure out mentors. Figure out who's going to give you good advice in life. Surround yourself with a diverse perspective of people. And be ready for the opportunity, because often what happens is opportunities, right, they knock when we're least expecting it, right? Opportunities come up when we're not ready for them, and then we miss them because we're like, oh, wait, should I? Wait. I think of it sometimes like double Dutch jump rope, where it's like, remember that? And like the double Dutch, you're like, I'm going to get in. No, I'm not. Wait, hold on. I'm not. Right? And then, wait, hold on. I'm in. And then you jump in and all the ropes get tangled up, right? Often, sometimes I have that sensation even with trying to break into a conversation, right? So be ready, get your self-doubt, like you'll have it, like a little whisper, and just be like, be quiet, like I'm getting in there, I'm getting in the mix. And so don't let that be a barrier. So those are the kinds of things these folks have taught me. Kay Julian in particular has always shared with me a couple of Teddy Roosevelt quotes, right? You guys know the man in the arena quote from Teddy Roosevelt, which is kind of listen to the critic who's in the ring. Like, we're all fighting some fight. And so let's get in there and get bloodied and bruised and fight the fight, instead of just staying on the sideline and, and doing that. The only person who never, succeeds is the person who doesn't try and fail, right? So that's kind of part of the process. I will tell you that I was, I sought, like I said, some advice from these folks here, but I also just had the opportunity yesterday to be at a luncheon with a bunch of CEOs, like business CEOs, newsmakers from the Kansas City Business Journal, and I was like invited. I was like a tag along, right? So they were all like luminaries, and I was a tag along, and because we were there, I said, "Can I pose a question to the group? I'm giving this talk tomorrow. What advice do you have around self-doubt?" And all of these business CEOs were like, "Oh yeah, self-doubt. We've been there." And they said things like, "Be vulnerable when you're experiencing it. Admit it. Get help. Have mentors. Stay authentic. Be open." Be prepared, take a deep breath, remind yourself of the competence you do have, like you're in this role because you have, something to offer. So I say that to say everyone experiences it sometime, and one of the tricks is to get help from others, right? And also give help. So depending on kind of where you are in your career, you may be seeking support from other people on this, or you may be approached. And so be a mentor to somebody else. So Machiavelli said there were only 2 emotions. Others have said it since then, but I think it started with Machiavelli. Do you guys know what the 2 emotions are? Any guesses? Oh, I don't know. Anything? Fear and love. Fear and love is what Machiavelli said are the only 2 emotions, and everything comes of those 2 things. You could agree or disagree, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And so when we are experiencing self-doubt, it's clearly fear-based. Right? I mean, it just is. And so figure out, what am I afraid of? What's the worst that can happen? What am I afraid of? Am I afraid, I keep saying that I'll look dumb. I think that's probably my biggest fear, right? So I'm just going to look dumb, right? I'm going to raise my hand and say something, and usually I'm afraid I'm going to ask a question that they just said, right? Like, the average length of stay at Ronald McDonald House is 8 days, and I'll be the one who's like, what's your average length of stay? And everyone in the room will be like, oh my God, wasn't she listening? That's kind of my fear, right? But your fear may be something else, right? But pay attention to what your fear is. And so what's the worst thing that happens? Really? So I asked that question, and whatever. Nothing bad happens. The ceiling doesn't fall in on me. It's fine. And P.S., no one cares, right? No one cares except me. Some of the research I read around particularly women, that women have a really hard time being videotaped for speaking, to become a better public speaker, and then being videotaped, because they're so afraid of how they're going to look on tape. It's like, well, let's talk about your public speaking skills, but we just get stuck somewhere in the process. So think about the fear versus love thing, and how can you show some empathy to yourself? What if you had some grace for yourself and said, I can come at this from a love kind of perspective instead of fear? We're learning a lot about leadership these days, right? And the old version, the kind of old accepted kind of myth, really, of leadership is this all-knowing and all-powerful and very kind of dictatorial and authoritarian, right? And you'll do what I say because I'm the boss. And that's really the old version of, it's ineffective leadership. That's old school thinking. We really are learning now that the best leaders are the kinds of things we've talked about, right? Open and authentic and vulnerable and learners. And self-doubt is part of the process. I suspect it was part of the process even before with the old version of leadership, and no one could ever admit it. But really, strong leaders, the best leaders, the most inspired leaders, show some vulnerability. If you're interested in learning more about this, Brené Brown does some really interesting work around vulnerability and inspired leadership, and what does it mean to be the best possible leader today, in this day and age, with the kind of things our zeitgeist and our culture and our kind of society expects of us. I read this very cool article. I read the whole article in this case, because it was an article, not a book. Harvard Business Review article called Connect, Then Lead. And they were talking about this kind of social psychology theory that we are judged on 2 qualities. So when people first meet us, they judge us on 2 things, like pretty instantly. Any guesses? Everyone's like, I don't want to get it wrong. Say it again. Appearance. Thank you. That's what we're all afraid of, and that's not what they said. So I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God that's not it, because that's what I'm afraid of. Other ideas? What people judge us on? Go ahead.
Friendliness or facial expression.
Friendliness. Warmth. Yes. So warmth is one thing people judge us on. What's the second thing? Say it again. How we act. It's a version of that. It's competence. And so what I like about competence, quite frankly, is that feels like a kind of low bar to me. Like, not brilliance, not like expertise, like being the king or queen of whatever your industry is. Competence, right? So when I think about warmth and competence, like, I can do that. Like, I know some stuff, and I can be kind and nice. Like, that feels less scary to me than feeling like I have to enter every room, like the kind of master of all I survey. And so I think whatever it is that is holding you up, right, in your leadership or your self-doubt, think about the things that you have to offer, and I think it will help you move forward. Remember, your goal is not perfection, right? Because if it is, you'll fail, right? And nobody likes the perfect people anyway. Because there aren't any. That's the thing. There aren't any, right? And the ones who are pretending to be perfect, right, we know they're not. So these are the things that are your goals. Self-awareness, right? Wisdom, maturity, grace. Forgive yourself when you screw up, because you will, right? So forgive yourself when that happens. Also forgive other people when they screw up, because they will, right? And so in as much as we are not expecting ourselves to be perfect, we don't expect our colleagues or families or friends to be perfect, right? And so then we get to a place of self-assurance where we understand that, this is it. It is it is what it is. We're all learning. We're all getting better. We are travelers on a shared journey. But there is no kind of one end-all, be-all state that we are working towards here. This notion of choosing optimism, I really love. This is a book, I keep making this joke. This one I did read the whole book because I love it. The notion of the happiness advantage. I heard the guy speak, Sean Aker. He's a Harvard psychologist researching happiness. And we often, all of us will say, if only X, then I'll be happy, right? If only I get the job, then I'll be happy. If only I lose the weight, then I'll be happy. If only I make the money, I'll be happy. And his theory that's been borne out by research is that choose happiness first, choose optimism, choose positivity, and then the good stuff will happen. You're more likely to get the job or make the money or lose the weight or whatever the thing is if you have a positive outlook about it. Happiness comes first. And so choosing happiness, the advantage that comes with that is a really powerful thing. So I think that in your leadership roles, when you're experiencing self-doubt, you will have whatever loud voice. It's always a loud voice, or sometimes it's a little whisper, right? The doubt whisper. There's another voice you can listen to, so find it. So when we think of going towards the light, right? Go towards the light. Give yourself some positive messages to listen to, and it will combat the bad stuff, I think, really pretty powerfully. For those of you who like lists of things, I thought let's kind of come back to just a big picture, right? So leadership and self-doubt. Here's what Forbes says. First thing to do is to recognize it is not unique to you. Hopefully that has been reinforced with this time together, right? That self-doubt is a universal human phenomenon. We all experience it sometimes at greater degrees, sometimes at lesser degrees. Question your doubt. So when it's happening, say, what am I learning from this? What is this trying to tell me? So, kind of lay into that instinct a little bit and say, what do I need to learn from this doubt that I'm experiencing? And filter your inputs around it too, right? So sometimes we'll kind of talk ourselves, we'll build a narrative in our head that's totally just a sort of a made-up thing, right? So question your doubt. And then number 3, seeking out support, advice, and mentorship from others. Again, I think the importance of this can't be overstated because we learn from each other. Relaxing and distracting yourself, I think of that as kind of the happiness piece, right? Just find something good about your day. Think about something else for a minute, and you will kind of bring yourself off whatever ledge psychologically you are perched on about this. Self-talk, right? Genghis Khan, Stuart Smalley, whatever it is that's powerful to you, give yourself positive messages. Think about yourself succeeding, whatever it is that you're nervous about. I mean, self-talk matters. I know it kind of feels like psychobabble. Of course, the psychology degree, MSW up here, is talking about self-talk, but just research bears it out. In fact, there have been studies that when people are reminded of stereotypes, negative perceptions of themselves, so say there's a questionnaire and they'll trigger negative stereotypes, people will do worse on the test than if they're given questions that help them remind them of positive things about themselves. They'll do better on the test, right? So the way you think about yourself impacts your performance. It just does. Setting specific goals, right? So make it achievable. You're not going to be perfect, so just know that. Set realistic and specific goals, and face your fears. Do the things that you're afraid of. So we are going to now open it up. So this hopefully triggered some thoughts for you or some reflections. Oh wait, no, I was going to share with you my final thought from one of my favorite authors, who is these were books I read all of, the Harry Potter series. And I love J.K. Rowling. I think she's brilliant, and I think she writes brilliantly, and I think there's some interesting things to be learned from all corners of the world. All right, so J.K. Rowling tells us it's impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously to have, or what is it? Unless you have, live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all. So failure, right, is going to happen. Right? And if you don't, here's the thing. I said if it's hard, you're worried if it's hard, you're not doing it right. It's more like if it's not hard, you're not doing it right. If you don't fail sometimes, you're not doing it right. You're not risking enough. So figure out where your kind of pressure points are, where your opportunity points are, and they say lean in, right? But just kind of go do that thing that you're afraid of, and you'll find self-doubt kind of melting away at times over that process. So what I want to do is start with a show of hands in terms of our discussion. So raise your hand if you've ever felt self-doubt. Everyone? Yeah? Oh, look at that. Hold it, keep them up. So seriously, look around, right? Everyone. I am telling you, Dr. Klein, thank you for your vulnerability, right? Because it happens. I'm just saying, right? Every hand in the room is raised. Oh, look, there we go. How about self-doubt in a leadership role? So it's easy to have self-doubt in high school leadership roles. Yeah, look, I think virtually every hand. So again, it happens. You're not doing it wrong if you're experiencing it. It happens. It doesn't need to be, we don't need to trigger shame around it. We don't need to trigger any kind of import around it besides knowing it happens. Then you figure out how to manage it, how to work within it. This I expect probably fewer hands. How about in the last 6 months? More recently? Yeah. Right, so a lot of hands. Me too, right? So I joined Ronald McDonald House 8 months ago. I've had plenty of self-doubt in that time. So again, draw some validation from each other with this. Know that it happens to all of us. And as I've said several times, get help and give help to each other around this. So I have 3 questions posed here. And I'll just ask you to comment. So raise your hand. Somebody will bring you a microphone. Help us learn from you or help us kind of guide our thoughts around this. What did you think about this? Like, what rang true for you? What tips and tricks do you have for your colleagues? Or what are your plans next? Maybe you're like, I need to get my own executive committee together. You know, not for actual meetings, because no one would come. Don't have actual executive committee meetings, because you'll be eating all the snacks yourself. But building a team of mentors for yourself. So who has a comment? Who will kind of share? Thank you. Go ahead. And there's a microphone there, so if you'll...
Oh, okay.
Good.
I'm usually pretty loud, but I actually... I wrote down the never compare the inside of your family to the outside of someone else's. And I am going to post that on Facebook because we live in such a social engineering world where you feel bad about yourself. Suggestions for colleagues. I always feel more confident after a box of wine. And finally, what I plan on doing now really is that positive self-talk, telling yourself you're good enough. I'm very good at giving recognition to others, but I'm awful at giving it to myself. So.
No. If you're giving yourself self-talk, then what am I supposed to do? Because I'm the positive one of the two of us drinking wine. And I would say to my colleagues, one of the things that you can do is when you jump off that ledge, trust that somebody will be there to at least lend you a hand, if not catch you entirely. Because switching career paths from being a lab rat, I did, my background's biochemistry, and now I'm an emergency preparedness manager. So to take that leap, that huge leap of switching careers, I had to have great people around to believe in me and to help me have the confidence that I needed to move forward with that. So know that there will be people around you to lend a hand, so grab it.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. That's why I kind of put trust in my there. Because I think trust matters. Trusting yourself, right? You know stuff. Trust yourself in that, or trust your colleagues. Yeah, but if you don't step off the ledge, right, you'll stay on the same ledge forever. Go ahead. Yeah. And then we'll come this way.
I was given the assignment a couple of months ago, well, actually it's longer than that, of building a website for the School of Medicine Finance. I am just about as techie as that American flag. And that's probably insulting the flag. Terrified. Knew I couldn't do it. Still don't know I can. But I've talked to some people that have been incredibly helpful. My office has been incredibly supportive. This will help me, as old as I am. And so anybody that has any good ideas about what you want on the School of Medicine Finance website?
Know who to go to.
Judy Brohammer.
That's
Jay
awesome.
Brohammer.
You know, you said something interesting. You're like, as old as I am. So it's interesting. I said, like, age can play a role, right? And sometimes we'll be more confident because it's like, I've done this, whatever this is, 1,000 times, so I'm super confident about it. Or, you know, regardless of how old we are, right, something is new. So I think, and figuring out where your strengths are, where you need help is a really important part of the process. Thank you for that. Other comments? Other side of the room? Go ahead. Microphone's coming to you.
Do you feel like you live with intention or you're more goal focused?
Say it again. Do I
Live with intention or are you more goal focused?
Me personally? I would say if I had to choose between the two, I'm probably more live with intention. That would be kind of my thing. And I have goals, right? We all have goals. But I believe very much in intentionality in terms of quite frankly, in terms of the kind of people that we are. I have a kind of an HR mantra. You know, we talk about the power of mantras. and it is to be brave and kind. So when we're dealing with personnel problems or things related to just other human beings, right? I want to be brave. We need to say the hard thing, right? Have the real conversation, and also kind. So that to me is about living with intentionality. I certainly have goals, like I said, have goals like we all do, but I think figuring out what kind of person you want to be, you are going to be more likely to meet those goals than if you're just driven towards goal achieving, but you don't have the kind of, strategic and psychological and kind of humanity around it, grace, wisdom, maturity, all those kinds of things. That's kind of my thought. Yeah. Here's what I'm thinking. I hope they don't think I'm dumb, right? Well, I hope that was the right answer. Thanks for asking that. It's 8. Good question. And there's no dumb question here. Thanks for that. Love it, love it. What else? What other kind of thoughts did this trigger? Either tips you have for your colleagues or things you've experienced or what resonated? Marty, can we send a microphone that way?
We're using the mic,
reduced
guys, 'cause
hearing
we
from
are
the
recording
Springsteen
this.
concert, right? So we have to, thank you.
So my question's more around the mental and self-doubt. So I'm wondering if as a society, it's just not okay for men to have self-doubt. And I have children and I have some boys. So I'm wondering what we can do as parents to, okay, so on the one hand, we want to say it's okay to have self-doubt, but we also we want our boys to know it's also okay to have self-doubt. So how do you do that? How do you do that within your family, and how do other people do that with their boys?
One thing that I think of is that maybe we just, in general, need to talk more about confidence, right? Because men, and this is my perception, right, from having looked at this, men tend to be more comfortable talking about confidence, ways to grow your confidence. And if we have that conversation in kind of a, male-centric space, and there's just a lot more to go on. So I think really what we need to do in the sort of feminized version of it is talk more about confidence, talk less about self-doubt, and talk more about self-assurance and confidence, so that we are all talking together about confidence. And then I think with our boys and our young men and our grown-up men in our lives, I think it just needs to be okay. There are going to be times when you don't feel as confident. Something is new and you're going to doubt your ability. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be terrified about the new website. I think using a lot of words around it kind of demystifies and takes some of the power away from self-doubt. So I think the ways we do that is we talk about it. I think we can share our own experiences because it feels like someone else's story until we share our own. And here are times when I was scared to do something, or go ahead, yeah.
Well, I see my boys have a lot of that false confidence, actually. And so, and they actually interact with each other in a way that kind of spurs that on too. And so I'm wondering how do you manage that? How does it, as men, how do you manage that with your sons and put that in perspective so it's real confidence instead of this, false confidence?
That's right. So, all right, men, I'm going to ask some man to weigh in on this, quite frankly, right? Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Hold on one second, because not everybody. I know it feels like you're being loud enough. No, it's totally fine. And 3, 2, 1. Now you're good. Start back over.
Yeah, I just think you lead by example. What your children see is what they'll eventually gravitate to. And I'm not disagreeing that you shouldn't talk about confidence and lecture about confidence, but just show confidence. And that's what I've done with my child. He has false sense of security also. I mean, he's 21 years old. He's been through the military. He's a cop. He is living by himself, but trust me, you can see it, but you just have to instill it. I mean, just live it and they'll eventually emulate you.
Do you think it's also true, hold on to that, do you think it's also true to lead by example and show vulnerability, like authenticity?
I think so. And boy, I could sit here and debate. A lot of people in the room know me, and so I like to debate just about anything. And I think it's true, but I also think there's a false presence in the room, because I do think there is, and I'm just separating it out, male versus female. I think I counted 12 men in the room.
Right.
I mean, that's how kind of geeky I am. I'm like, oh, how many guys are here? 1, 2, 3. Oh, yeah, there's like 12. Okay, this is great for my argument, and stuff like that. But I guess where I was going with it is, I think it's false that women say it's okay. Because I think, and this is just my personal opinion, and just from maybe some personal experiences, that you say it's okay, but I think it's probably okay once or twice. It's probably not okay all the time to not be a confident person. And that's just my personal opinion.
I think it's a brilliant point.
So.
A brilliant point. And so let's be real with each other, right? That the expectations, I mean, women tend to be or are often horrible to each other, right? Bitchy and backbiting and stabby and whatever to each other, and will sometimes put men on this unrealistic pedestal, right? So we want them to be vulnerable or whatever, but then when they actually are, there's a backlash around it. So maybe we could be kind to each other, right? Maybe we could expect humanity from each other, which involves the whole spectrum, right? Which involves the whole spectrum of the human experience. And so I absolutely get it. So that's where it is often really difficult for men to be vulnerable, right? That trust factor, because the sort of the jumping of the ledge and trusting the universe will catch you or that people will be accepting. Sometimes the universe is not accepting of this, right? And so I think it's a great point. It's a really good point. Thank you for making it. Go ahead. Right behind you.
Just to touch on that, there's some research that I've read that has to do with, we spend so much time talking about how women are damaged by the gender roles that we're expected to fulfill, being the caretaker, and we have more self-doubt, and we don't have body love, like, body image love. And men are built up to be these big, like, always self-assured, always confident, always there and providing. But they're damaged by that just as much because they spend their entire childhood saying, boys don't cry. Well, boys do cry. Boys do have feelings. And they're suppress that whole emotion. So when they grow up into adulthood and they have emotions, they can't express them. And that's damaging to them.
Right. So we are up against 1 o'clock. So I will say this, that clearly there's a deep well of things to be explored around this, right? I mean, it's real, and everyone experiences it, and everyone experiences it differently, sometimes based on your age or your gender or other factors in your life. And so I think what you can do to be understanding of yourselves, understanding of each other, and kind of move forward in leadership and self-assurance to make the world a better place. So with that, we conclude at 1 o'clock. Thank you for being here.